Oh, and by the way, one other thing, I forgot to ask this about the top game, because a moment that's really key, but it was so early in the game, people are going to forget it, is actually top was in a great position until they did that attempted, like, fight where they stayed too long at top and Knight just like blew the fucking Shurima shuffle on like the support or something, and then Odo did that like mad TP in. That's another thing I've noticed has changed about your team from the playoffs onwards, dude. It's like the actual like bloodthirstiness of Rogue is just fire now, mate. Like the people like Odo, they just go in, they never leave a man behind. It's like you just keep fighting. It's like the old Rogue would have been the team that'd back off if a guy died or something. Like the mentality must have changed now, right?
I mean, it just comes down to numbers and like how well we read numbers on the map. Like if we know we have even numbers, you know, for example, the way I view the game is it's very scientific. I think League of Legends is actually a really poorly made game in the sense that if you're ahead and both sides are playing perfectly, then the head side will basically always win. I mean, depending on draft and all, but as a general concept, right? And the only way you can kind of circumnavigate that is if the other side either makes a mistake or you exploit it via forcing mistakes, either by man advantages. And we're just better at, you know, opening on 3 lanes, shifting into 2, for example, retaking Dragon in certain positions and talking about how to do this. And for example, as you said, like the fact that we're aware of our TPs and spell checks and how we can match numbers and punish a mistake, right? And as for that point where you made about the Z shuffle and the support, Thorin, what you don't realize is that it feels so good when he gets that support and scoops them up.
Of course, yeah.
And it just feels so good, you know? So he had to do it.
Thing is, though, even though you're saying that like lightheartedly, this is another real concept that is so lost when people analyze the game. Obviously, in the vein of how LS does, where he's trying to look at idealized gameplay and how the best possible play would be, which is these are young guys playing video games that have a fun element to how you practice them. Because there's a point that my mate Lurpis often says in Counter-Strike, and he was proven so right, it's unbelievable, which is years and years and years ago, early on in CSGO, there were certain pistol weapons you could buy that were like way too cheap, they were way too powerful, and basically you could just, it was like gambling, you could just sort of like flip the coin, and if you got heads you got a kill or two, and you were right back in the game. And so at the time it actually was mathematically and in terms of like expected value the best play to always buy those pistols. You never really did like a true save, you always bought them and you gambled like your skilled players might get a kill. But what Lurpis said, and he nailed this so hard, is he said, oh, just wait, when they nerf these weapons and put the price up on the weapons, people will still keep buying them all the time. And he said the whole reason why is this: it's fun to have one of those, it's fun to feel like you're in the game, that you're doing something, that there's a chance for something exciting to happen. At the end of the day, it is a game, and unfortunately that element, like you have the same dopamine circuits in your brain, you have the same reward circuits, where like you're saying, if you do, by the way, if you do that killing solo queue, you're swagging on them, aren't you? It's like, oh fuck you, like I could do this, I'll get this kill, like you can't do anything to me. But in that scenario, it's like that also opens the window, whereas you're talking about, you can be behind in a game, and sometimes you just have to wait for them to give you a chance to get back in the game. They'll do it, some of these teams, especially the LPL teams, as we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really, really good YouTube video that's going to come out on this, on an amazing YouTube channel called youtube.com/seal. And basically,
I enjoyed your wave manipulation video on that channel. You're actually making very good content right now, so people should definitely go follow you.
Okay. Did you hear that, guys? Anyway, thank you, appreciate that. No, I'm about to talk about bad habits in a new video, and basically there's a scientific study on how habits form, and they start with a trigger, which is a certain position or action in the game, or you know, in real life, and then you have the process, which is the actual habit, and then you have the reward. And you know, the primary idea behind the habit is formed by the reward, and they say that the more instant the reward, the easier the habit is to form. And what happens in League of Legends, and a big issue with League of Legends right now, is that it's a video game. A lot of the professionals, and say for CSGO, right, a lot of the professionals play because it's fun, that's how they start.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of high elo players form all of their decision making around what is what feels good in the moment, right, for the ultimate dopamine hit, which is to win the game, right? And a good example of this is AD carries dying on mid-wave. Like, why does this happen to every AD carry in the world? Why does this happen? Well, there's a mid-wave. They associate the mid-wave with instant gold, dopamine by buying items, press buttons, and then they win the game, right? And so that's kind of this specific study is what actually ended up banning corporal punishment in the US, because they realized that punishment was negatively reinforcing. It wasn't actually removing these bad habits to begin with, and the way that you need to be tackling these is by rewarding them with an alternative instant stimulant. So I think that what teams need to be doing in the future is, for example, drilling certain concepts over and over, and then giving them some sort of reward or praise or positive reinforcement to follow up with this. But it just doesn't really happen in League of Legends, does it? Like in sports, it does. Like you drill the same concept, you get praised by your coach, and it's excellent. In League of Legends, all you do is have scrims, and so I think this is a very, very interesting concept, and more coaches should be using this. Sorry, negative punishment for the corporal punishment, and they're two separate things.
Yeah.
Negative punishment versus
right,
positive reinforcement. And positive reinforcement is like one of the most powerful tools. But where are you going to get the positive reinforcement? Are you going to get it in a solo queue environment if you're a player, or like matchmaking in CS:GO? No, because if you don't carry the game, in CS:GO, someone will just say curse words in Russian, and League of Legends, someone will insult your family, and so they just do whatever they can to kind of win the game instantly, and it's very hard to improve in that manner. That's why I think professional teams will start to take a shift, take a pounce toward traditional coaching and performance coaching, and that's really what I base a lot of my coaching on. So it's actually a really interesting topic, and I'm going to talk about that later on, so you can. Yeah.
I mean, the joke is, like the meme analogy would be, that's obviously the problem that TSM had all those years. They kept getting that like short-term dopamine hit, like we won the LCS, we can do it, and then they go to Worlds to get put in a body bag, don't they?
Yeah, and they play the same way every year. It's really insane, right?
Indeed.
Well, that's because Bjergsen has a very distinct play style. I mean, you saw it on Liquid this year too. I don't think Bjergsen's playstyle is very compatible with most people's conception of the modern game of League of Legends.
It's because the problem is when he goes international, he hasn't got that little bog that he implants on the back of everyone's head when he goes on an LCS in the BO1s. He gives everyone a hug, and then he plants a little bog on the back of your neck. And then in the playoffs, he has that little radio device, and he activates it, puts the dial up to 11, and then everyone just goes, "Int, I must activate it, brother agent activated," and they just int into him. But internationally, they don't do that because it's a bowing culture, Monty. They don't come in for the embrace and the handshake, especially not the last few years. So it's more like that. Listen, I've always got angles, Steve. I'm always coming with something. Don't worry about it. It's all bollocks, but it's always an angle. You got to understand. I'm like Malrang.
Nerf Bjergsen.
Yeah, I'm like Malrang. There's always an angle. Don't worry. There's always an angle. I'm a Jarvan main, mate.
Alternatively, actually interesting is that I actually think that one of the biggest reasons NA is like not doing so hot or not really improving as a region that much lately is because of the instant dopamine and the bad habits. And the biggest bad habit, in my opinion, is not speaking your mind and talking about the topics that you need to talk about in the team, right?
Yes, that's interesting.
Right? That is the reward that you get for that is keeping your job. So like job security, for example. In Europe, this is one of the reasons I wanted to say is nobody gives a fuck. I mean, this is something that I noticed, you got to say what you got to say. But in NA, you say the things that you need to say, and unless you're a Bjergsen or Doublelift or someone that's been around with 1 billion followers, you're probably going to lose your job, or people are probably not going to like you, play politics, and you're probably going to, not have a great time in the next couple of years, right? So I actually think that some of the old greats that have had incredible longevity, a lot of that success is partially due to their attitude and due to their mindset towards competitiveness and being able to give feedback to their players, and then basically management and other players not being able to do shit about it, because you just have to say, okay, this guy's been around longer than me, I'm just going to nod my head and learn, and then the environments are naturally better and teams just probably get better. But how sustainable is that? How sustainable is that? And how did they build that career to begin with? How did they build that fame to begin with? Well, the narratives behind the beginning of the LCS, the storytelling, which Monty talks about in a lot of his videos, that don't really exist anymore. So you don't really see too many big names like you did back then. The Dariuses, the I'm not going to say Reggie. I'll say the Dariuses, the Bjergsens, the Doublelifts, the people that have been around post like season 3, for example, right? Season 4, season 5, season 6. So nowadays it's like, okay, you have a Jojo Pune, very good player. Who else? I can't really think of too many off the top of my head.
It would have been Danny,
No
but
one
he
knew.
obviously isn't here. Yeah, of course, at this point. Yeah, there's not that many, of course.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
By the
yeah.
way, the point you're making is actually a broader point as well, because I
Fudge.
remember along similar lines what you're talking about, the fact that if you essentially you build these habits of not addressing things. This might sound like a really off-the-wall analogy, but it's just a real-life one you can go and look into. I remember reading a really fascinating interview with a woman who escaped from North Korea, and what she said was, it wasn't what you think if you've watched a movie. You're going to think that the whole time, with like a Western mind, that everyone there in their head is thinking like, this is so fucked up, like that we're obviously under like a totalitarian regime and we can't say anything, but we all think it, and we all know it's a lie. No, she said it's the opposite. She said what happens is when you just become so trained to never say certain things and to never notice certain things and to comment on things with other people and say things like to validate each other's feelings, like, isn't this wrong, or what are we doing here? He said when you don't ever do it, you actually even start to like lose those concepts in your mind. You don't actually think to, you actually do start to like agree with the consensus. And the joke is, it's only when she left, she sort of like almost deprogrammed herself and was like, whoa, that was crazy that was going on. So I get the vibe it'll be the same thing. If you're in one of these teams, if you aren't able to say essentially, like to make it very quick, like, why the fuck did the jungler not come when I said like I needed a top gank, like my wave was set? If you can't say that and instead you have to sort of like hold your tongue and then wait, and then everyone just picks a simple thing we can all agree upon, like, obviously we should have not stayed for Baron. Eventually in your brain, that game becomes like, no, we just overstayed on Baron, and you don't think of any of the other things. That's really you're gonna have blinkers on if you think that way. I agree.
One of the first big sorry, go ahead.
No, it's the reason why this happens is because, first off, American culture, obviously. Second off, the fact that some of these players that count as NA residents, so they're either literally from NA, or they are players who are grandfathered into NA, or they are players who have gotten green cards, are so incredibly valuable to the roster construction process that they hold an inordinate amount of control. Having these players attracts, it makes it so much easier in terms of roster construction. In Europe, you can just, you don't have the same boundaries. Like, you're not trying to figure out which 3 European players you're going to have on the team. Yeah, sure, maybe you have an import player. You've got one right now in Malrung, but has there ever really been a European roster that was foiled because they couldn't actually get more than 2 imports? No, but that happens all the time in NA, and so it creates this culture of not being able to speak their mind, management having incredible priority on NA residents, and these people become protected within the system. That's why it happens.
I can confidently say it's not for all management, right? I mean, I can tell you, for example, 100 Thieves is not like this, and they're very successful. I know for a fact that Cloud9's not like this, because I know the ins and outs of a lot of I've talked to a lot of their players, for example. Yeah. I know for a fact that Evil Geniuses is not like this, because that's a team I almost went to, right? And look at the teams, look at the success in that team. It's very obvious. And so I completely agree with that. And actually, one of the first things I did when I came to Rogue was talk about how to give and take criticism properly, and just continuously working on that. And alternatively, I want to say,
can you actually give an example for that? Like, what when you say that, like, how would you characterize it? I mean, put it this way: I'm assuming it's not as crazy as that, like, famous one.
You don't have to
sort of. No, but everyone saw that.
Name.
Everyone saw that video. Everyone was loving with the Maokai coach comes in and he's like, "Oh, guys, what the fuck are you doing?" Because he's just like that's a man like on the edge about losing his job. I'm assuming you're not doing that. So give us like a sense of what you mean. How would you characterize what it's like?
I mean, I don't name names, but like give an example of like something that you changed. Right? We're not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but what is an example?
I mean, first of all, I didn't agree with the Maokai thing fully. Like, for example, smashing the desk, that's unnecessary, right? You can just speak more sternly or whatever. But an example of feedback taken the wrong way or given the wrong way is say you've made a mistake in the game where possibly you've died at Baron, right? And they're criticizing you for that. And the other side has died 4 or 5 times in a game. It's not relevant whether or not that guy's died 4 or 5 times, but the immediate thought process, the thought chain that forms in most players' minds is, okay, the main reason we lost is because this guy died 4 or 5 times, not the actual point that we died on Baron off tempo, right? Off taking bad base or overstaying on the map. And this is really, really important for 2 reasons. One, if the feedback is taken in an aggressive way and you just say, oh, well, you entered, how about you fix that first? For example, this is not exactly what happened, but for example, then what would happen is then you don't learn. You don't learn something that could happen over and over again in games. That's very, very important. And two, the other guy is just going to think that you're deflecting and hate you for it, right? And so a lot of these instances occur in every team. I almost would say that it's not even just an American subculture thing. I would say that it's more of like a competitive team thing. The problem is in Europe, and here's one of the big benefits behind Europe. And for those of you that don't know, in Germany, there's a lot of worker protection law. So you can't actually get fired for no reason. If you have a 2-year contract and a team wants to replace you and, you know, someone's trying to play politics, you can just sit on your contract if they don't have a legitimate reason to fire you. And you should have that contract. Like anyone should have that contract. It's just basic protection. But in NA, if you get fired, if you fuck up one day, you're gone the next day. There's nothing you can do about it. And I think that actually plays a big role. And I know for a fact in previous experiences talking to a lot of players that people just don't speak up because they're afraid, right? Not even because they're not even due to the bad habit thing. So, I mean, this is not the best at all. And a lot of North American contracts normally give, 2 to 3 months severance pay after you're done. And like I mean, that's for a lot of players, maybe it's not a big deal. You can go back to your parents or whatever, but I think for the older players, the players that have moved out, or the players that don't have that kind of support in their household. For example, if I went to NA and I got fired, I would not have anywhere to go, right? Like before taking my esports journey, some of my family members came to me and said, "You're never going to make it. You're wasting your time. You're delusional." Right? So, I mean,
I think they tweet me on Twitter sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, they tend to do that. They don't like ginger storm.
There you go. Exactly. Me, awesome.
But in general, like this is a really big problem, So I think that's the main problem. I really think. I think all teams have it, but NA it's even worse.
See, I know what you mean. Yeah, in theory, it's a bit fucked up. He smashed the desk and he was screaming. All I'll say is this, mate. If I was a fucking coach, you would think I was accessing a new level of Super Saiyan if I lost a game. I'd be doing for like 4 minutes.
Okay. Here's the interesting thing about that. There's a lot of scientific study, and I tend to try to read these for some kind of evidence behind my thinking. And they say that negative punishment or positive punishment, in that instance, it's probably positive punishment because there are no personal attacks. They are effective. Direct input is always effective, and it's scientifically proven. It's just that the paper always warns of potential side effects. Now, as a coach in a sports team, you're stuck in the confines of time, of short time, and a very top heavy ecosystem where if you're not performing, you're in a lot of trouble, right? Both as an org and as a individual. And so you have to make these teams perform in suboptimal environments. And benching is not always the option. Sometimes you might not have the right player, or sometimes it's too late into the season. So that's where this kind of more direct input, raising your voice can come to mind. Comes to mind and can be effective. But then again, you have people like Phil Jackson. For example, he's known as the Zen Master. This guy literally never yells ever, and he can still win championships. So, I mean, the argument is, okay, there are both sides of the coin. I think that traditional coaching encompasses a lot of this, like speaking out loud and yelling, and there are lots of benefits to it, but it's not particularly necessary in all circumstances. I've yelled myself in this team, for example. Right, but it just really depends on the circumstances of what you need to do.
Right, and also looking in from the outside too, you have to remember that these are extremely competitive people, that you have to be kind of crazy to dedicate this much time and energy to being good at a game, whether it's sports or esports. And so these people get very angry, all of them, when they lose. Yeah. Right? If you don't get angry when you lose, you will never have the drive to make it to this level. And so when people look at it who don't have that drive from the outside, they may see this as like, oh my God, like this is so crazy. But oftentimes that can be an effective way to coach if you know that your players respond positively to that. They may not even view that necessarily as a personal attack. That may get them to a place where it increases their drive because they're all feeling that way, right? And if one person is expressing that feeling, it can be cathartic in a way, right? It can be a cathartic. You might sit there as a player and be like, damn, I appreciate that he's mad because now I'm mad at myself that we didn't do our best, or I'm mad that, I fucked this up. And that can drive you to the next level. So it really is, the good coaches will be able to read their players. And it may not be the right coaching style for every single player, but maybe it is for that team. Like, I'm not there. I don't fucking know. And there's a reason why many effective coaches have taken these techniques in sports, and it's not considered, abusive or egregious. I think if you've played sports, you've all been in that situation. I mean, it's the people who haven't played sports that haven't seen that. You know what I mean?
I mean, and personally, I think that being able to not take things personally should be one of the first tasks that all coaches handle. And if for example you're yelling without the correct circumstances, for example, you're very short on time, you haven't taught your players how to not take things personally, and that player responds negatively because that's just how they are as people, and you're using personal attacks, these are big no-nos. But if it's a right environment for the right people, it can be tremendously empowering, but they just have to be able to not take it personally. I know for a fact that while I coach, I have avoided yelling at specific players throughout my career, but I may be yelling at some others, right? Maybe in a team environment, it's a bit different.
People shut down in that circumstance, and they just
no matter what you do. No matter what you do, you can't do anything about that. But it's kind of like you adapt to the situation. And I always thought that good coaches can make, good teams great and the best, but the best coaches can make bad teams good, right? And the best coaches know what fights they can't take, whereas the good coaches just generally know what fights they have to take. That's the kind of outlier for me. If you most coaches that are really good at this level know what fights they have to take, right? But at the very, 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 very apex, I've noticed that they realize when not to take those fights or who to not take those fights with. And I remember, for example, this finals, I'm not saying I'm the best, but as an example, I didn't say anything to certain situations that were not good because it was not the time, or was just not the right person or the right circumstance, right? So people that can do that consistently are, I think, at the top of the league.
Yeah, I would say the key distinction, I think you did a good one there, where the good coach, essentially one of the problems a lot of coaches have is they just have one style, just like players, and they just apply what they think works best in all scenarios. And if you're good, that'll get you results, like you say, it might work on most players. So like Monty's saying, I think it's actually the reason why a lot of star players struggle in team environments. If the star player is some double lift, forgiven type character where they're super driven, they do just live and breathe this game. They want to be the best. They want to be better even than they've been now. They want to win again nationally. They think they can beat Uzi I and those guys. If they then see a teammate slacking or fucking up in the game, they think, right, essentially what would motivate me? Tell you what, if someone kicked me up the arse and said, hey, you're fucking up for everyone right now, you're stopping me winning the game. But there's certain teammates that will just make them shut down, mate. That will actually ruin them completely. Whereas that's maybe the guy where, if you know what you're doing, that's the guy actually you need to give a pat on the back or go, you know what, in the next game, you don't even need to worry about that as much. We'll take care of this for you. Just get to this point in the game and be useful. That's the guy. You might do the opposite with that guy. You've got to have a different approach, obviously, for everyone.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, though, if it's too far. Even if it means burning the bridges or whatever you need to do, whatever you feel like needs to that you need to do to win. I think that's a coach's job. And in the end, coaching is a very humbling job. I've said this many times. It's all about the players. If you don't have good players, it's going to be really hard to win. And you are that support staff. It just sometimes comes down to, okay, how many people can you support with this going forward? You have to choose. You have to make difficult decisions, and so it's really a balance of a lot of things. And I completely agree with what you guys are saying.
Someone just clipped that out of context, so it's only the part of me sat there and then him going, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You got to burn bridges, and I'm just going, just do that. It's always giving me life advice on how I run my career.
I mean, I actually think that too. I agree with that. I think that sometimes you have to do what you got to do in terms of burning bridges in life as well, right?
Yeah, but my problem is I was just doing it for fun. I was like, you know what, Monty? I'm going to burn another one. He's like, no, you've already burnt 4 this one. I'm like, nah, but it's there. I've got the gasoline. So but we might need that guy.
It feels too good. That's Monty. The equivalent of him doing the Azirals on the support. It just feels.
No, my problem is this. I will go and I'll do the fucking Cortez move. I'll arrive. I'll burn the ships. I'll go. I'm not leaving until I've conquered this place. But when I finish conquering it and I go back home in Spain, right, time to retire. I go, you know what? This Spain could do with a bit of a revolution. I burn the ships again. again. Take another one. And the guys are like, oh, come on, can we just every now and then be selective with it? Come on, not every day, Thorin. And the sad thing is, I've told people I've changed my strategy the last month or so. I'm sort of taking a more tactical approach. I've made it a bit more lighthearted. I've brought the beak face back because the problem was it had gotten to the point where I knew that social media had pushed me and Richard to the absolute limit. Because whereas he would be sort of saying like, we've got to like disengage, we can't be involved. And I was going to him, like I had that like death stare when someone's been in war for too long. I was like, you don't understand, Richard. I'm built for war. If they want to keep coming, then I'm gonna take them all down. It's like I was at the end of it. So it's like I had to peel back off. Let's be more tactical. Let's just figure out when to completely firebomb the village, as it were. Just selectively, not all the villages, just the right ones. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.